Welcome to this series, the Encompass Mental Health and Communication series. I am Louise Hanson, and on behalf of the Encompass team, it's my pleasure to introduce Brian Knowler to you. I was just in the midst of going through a couple of housekeeping points there where we were disconnected, but I wanted everybody to know that we have purposely disabled the cameras and the microphones so that everyone can participate anonymously. The presentation is being recorded, and we will host it on the Encompas site so that anyone who is not able to be here today can check it out there. We will stop the recording though once we begin with the Q&As at the end of the session. We ask that you submit any questions that you have through the Q&A feature, and those will come to the panel here. And once we get to the Q&A session, we will read them out to ensure anonymity. So in addition to any questions or comments that you might want to make through that Q&A, if as you're listening, you're appreciating what Brian is saying and it resonates with you, feel free to type AAAA for awesome into that Q&A, and we'll have an opportunity to share that with Brian as well.
Oh, is that what that means?
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
Oh, good. Lovely. Okay.
All righty. So now my pleasure to introduce Brian Knowler. Brian is a veteran police officer, a retired lawyer, speaker, and author who's involved in the justice system since 1994. In 2004, he was a lead investigator in a motor vehicle crash involving the death of a close friend, causing his life to spiral until he was finally diagnosed with and began therapy for PTSD in 2012. Brian has published 2 books about his experiences with trauma and leadership. On the Other Side of Broken, One Cop's Battle with the Demons of PTSD in 2016, and Career Suicide is Overrated in 2018. He's also a freelance writer for outlets including Vocal and What Culture. Brian speaks and consults for media outlets on issues surrounding trauma, leadership, public safety across North America. He is a creator of the Capital L Leadership Training Program and facilitates ongoing mastermind groups and training sessions, exploring the Capital L leadership concepts for professionals. Brian's Capital L Leadership Program received the 2019 Corporate Livewire Award for Excellence in Mental Health. He is a graduate of Queen's University Workplace Mental Health Leadership Certificate Program, certified leadership coach, mindfulness coach, critical incident stress supporter, and a member of the International Institute for Mental Health Leadership. And we're thrilled to have him here. Today, Brian will share some of his personal and mental health journey following that tragic event. And he'll talk about how he rebuilt family and professional life while continuing to work, and the important role that leadership plays in his ongoing journey. His goal today in sharing his story is to provide hope that one can recover and grow even from the worst times in life. So with that, I want to turn it over to Brian, and we're really excited to have you, Brian. So thank you so much.
I'm excited to be here. So before I start, obviously, I'd like to thank the Encompass team, Louise and Jen, who reached out to me and asked me to present today. I was thrilled at the opportunity to do so. I jumped on it right away. Basically, they said, would you talk to our members? And before they even explained, I had already filled this gap in on my schedule. Normally, I would say I was coming to you from Chatham, Ontario, which for those of you who know where that is, it's in sort of the south part of West Region. But today I'm actually joining you from Niagara Falls because I'm on leave this week, and my wife and I decided at the very last minute to get away for a couple of days. We have 2 teenage boys at home who can more or less handle themselves in the house now. So my wife and I thought we would jet off for a couple of days. So regardless, I'm very happy to be here and so pleased to be speaking with, I know we have uniform members on today. I know we have civilian members, support members, retirees. I'm thrilled to be able to have a chance to address the group and address Encompass. And I'm thrilled that they're going to be able to post it on their site as a resource for down the road. So as Louise mentioned during my, I should say I am still working. I am still, I did have some leave time last year. I am still working. I'm currently attached to communications in Aurelia, working on the radio refit project, and I am a staff sergeant. But yeah, aside from all that, the thing I really want to focus on today is what Louise talked about, is about my passion for storytelling about mental health, leadership, and basically just using my story to get the word out about things and about trauma, about OSIs. And when I first started doing this, I promised myself and my wife that two things. One, I would when I told the story, it would be the good, the bad, and the ugly, because there was definitely some ugly. And two, I would, if I had to, I'd tell my story a million times if it hit even one person every time that I talked. So here we are, and thank you again. I know for attending today. I know some of you are probably taking some time off work or taking some time out of your day, and I appreciate that very much. So as Louise said, back in 2004, I was the first one on the scene, pre-ambulance, pre-fire, pre-everybody, of a two-vehicle collision between a pickup and a minivan. Now, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about the crash itself because that's not really what this is about. If it was a longer session, if it was more of a training session, I would give a little more background. But really, for our purposes today, it's really not that relevant. The key was that I was the first one there. There was one party injured very badly. It ended up being one of my best friends from university, and he died basically in my arms as I was, getting ready to do first aid, CPR, life-saving measures. He was very badly injured in a rollover, severe, injuries everywhere. The primary one was he had lost a lot of blood through a cut on his neck, but he ended up having broken bones and, compressed lung. And it was there was no way he could have survived it. I was later told by a doctor who reviewed his file that they could have had a trauma team basically at the site of the crash, and he would have had about a 5% chance of surviving. So the more important part, as far as I go with that story, is I never took the time to really process it. I was an acting sergeant at the time, so I went right from dealing with the emotions of my friend and dying, to switching gears and having to supervise now a fatal, or what was likely to be a fatal, I should say, because the paramedics did revive my friend Mike. He was comatose for 2 or 3 more days, and then his family made the decision to end his life support. So the paramedics at the scene did revive him, but as far as I was concerned, this was going to be a fatal. And of course, as everybody knows, fatalities mean a lot of paperwork, a lot of follow-up. So I had to pivot right from, like I said, the emotions of being in this, dark, broken, shattered minivan, to going, okay, Officer A, I need you to, you've got to grab statements. Officer B, I need you to go down and block the road. Officer C, I need you to call, TCI and recon, right? So I never really processed it at the time. I kind of threw myself into the call for the rest of the evening. I knew something wasn't quite right. I was already having trouble focusing, on my notebook. When I closed my eyes, I would just see the inside of the van. Mike was a sales guy for Chrysler, so he carried a lot of paperwork, brochures, contracts, things like that. And the inside of the van had been plastered with paper. So, when I looked down at my notebook, all I could see when I, started to write was the inside of that van. And I just wasn't focusing. Now I would have been removed from the scene. Absolutely, the policies have changed tremendously. I would have been sitting with a member of the peer support team probably within an hour. Instead, I finished the call. I worked the rest of the evening. I did the death notification to Mike's wife, who was also my friend, and had a lot of, that was a horrible experience. Of course, she had a lot of questions. I didn't have a lot of answers. And then at the end of the shift, I went home. I made my first real mistake 12 hours probably into this, as my wife came out. Normally my routine was to go home, check in on my kids, both of whom were quite small then, chat with my wife a little bit. She was a teacher at the time, and hop in the shower and head to bed, sleep for the next night shift. Well, that morning I went onto the deck with, a bottle of scotch and a glass of ice, and drank 2 or 3 glasses in very quick succession. and finally just kind of let some tears flow. And my wife came out. I heard the patio door behind me, and I heard her say, "What's going on?" And I just said something like, "Bad call, bad night. Don't want to talk about it." So less than 12 hours after this, what I now absolutely see was a critical incident for me. I had a chance to start talking, and I didn't. I carried it, and I thought, nope, this was my call. I grew up in this town. I wanted the police in the town that the area that I grew up in. This is just part of leadership, or, being the boss, of being a shift supervisor, and I'll just deal with it. So after a couple of weeks of nightmares and, looking back now, avoiding the area of the crash when I was on patrol or when I was driving around, I thought everything was fine. And within about a year after that, I got promoted to sergeant. Within a year and a half after that, promoted to staff sergeant. We went up north. And again, I thought everything was great. I was moving up the chain. I became an incident commander. So I was, traveling all over at the time, Northeast region, doing calls all the way up to, Cochrane, and I did a bit of time in some of the fly-in areas as an incident commander. I was also, ironically enough, I was on our peer support team at the time, doing debriefings with officers, doing group debriefings, individual debriefings, and telling officers, here are the things that are likely to happen or that you're likely to feel, within the next 1 day, 7 days, 30 days kind of thing. And never once did I look in the mirror and go, hey, Brian, all these things you're talking about, they're happening to you. And looking back now, I was absolutely bubbling myself off for my family. I was starting to turn to alcohol. In 6 months or so before what I call my crash, I was drinking every night to cope and to just get some numbness. Bubbling myself off from family life. My wife basically ran the house from 10 years ago, right around this point is right around when this started. And yeah, my wife is a very strong woman. She grew up in a policing family, so she got the lifestyle, she got the culture. But man, I put her through the ringer. And if she was any less of a woman, she would have long ago left me in the dust. But we stuck it out, and here we are still. I was using work as a mask. I was using work as a safe place because there I felt in control. I felt like I was on top of things. And then when I got home, I was miserable. To be honest, I was an asshole. I was a horrible dad. I was a horrible husband. I was super professional at work and had everything together at work. And then I would get home and it would just all fall apart. So looking back now, there were absolutely things I can pick out where I go, yep, that should have been a sign. That should have been a signal. One day on the way to a call, I had a panic attack. And it was because I saw a van similar to what Mike was driving that night. Just, little things like that should have tipped me off that there was something going on. Finally, in 2011, the end of 2011 was what I call, my really starting to spiral downwards. I was very detached from the family. I was using alcohol constantly. We had a chance to move. We had an opportunity to transfer. I took it. We moved a little further south. I actually went to Caledon Detachment, which was ended up actually being ultimately a life-saving thing. So one night, my wife and I were having a discussion about the state of our marriage and the state of, we moved from the north to central Ontario, and probably the most serious talk of our marriage. And as we're talking, and as my wife is laying out, very, you're not the same guy. I don't know who you are. I don't recognize you anymore. You're not the same with the kids. All I could see was, every person who's been in policing, no matter what position you play, has a mental film strip of things they've seen, of things that, I'm dating myself. Film strip has a mental MP4 file. Okay, for those of you who are younger and don't know what a film strip is, of things we've seen, heard, remember, read, and that was playing as I was having this conversation. And that was finally the night that I broke. I crashed physically, emotionally, psychologically. I, literally collapsed on the couch and started bawling. And it wasn't crying. It was, bawling tears, heavy tears, and couldn't catch my breath. And, my wife, despite the disagreement we were having, moved over and sat next to me and just put her arms around me. And for the first time that night, I told the story from start to finish to someone, starting with how I felt that night of Mike's crash, all the way to my crash that night, and started to realize, okay, this is way deeper than just being depressed, or way deeper than just being sad about the results of an incident. This is now, just over 7 years since Mike's death, and this is now ingrained into me. This is deep seated and had been, rooted in even more by things I had experienced in the subsequent 7 years. And for the first time that night, the first time ever, I said, something's wrong. I need help. I can't do this on my own. And saying that was it was very profound, because it was like this weight coming off, and I thought, okay, it's out there now. I have to deal with it. So my wife and I chatted a bit more, and it finally came to a point where, it was very late now very early in the morning, and my wife and I said, okay, what do we do from here? Where do we go? And she said, Bri, I love you. I don't like you a whole lot right now, but I want you in our lives. I want you in the lives of the kids, but you need to, get some help or get out. And that was a really courageous thing for her to do, because that would have meant for her likely moving back home, moving to Chatham, where we actually live now. And but she said she would rather do that than not know the Brian that was coming through the door, and what mood I was in, and what mood swings would I be in, and would I want, would I be eating dinner, all these things. So within the next day, I made some calls to our peer support people. And the process would be so different now with what Encompas has put in place for OPPA members, and their families, and the extended family would be so different now. But even back then, this is almost 10 years ago. Our EAP folks, our critical incident folks, put me in touch with a really good psychiatrist, who very quickly diagnosed me with chronic PTSD that was, basically started that night with Mike's death, and just built on everything subsequently, and started me on a course of treatment. I I had to go into my brand new inspector's office. I've been working for her for about 3 days, and sit and say, hey, I have something to tell you, and just basically regurgitate all this to her. I think I have PTSD, and my marriage is in trouble, and I know I've only been here a little while, but I don't know what to do. And I just got it all out. And she was fantastic. A little later, I talk about leaders who got me through this time, and she was absolutely one of them. Because at that point, looking back now, I realized she kind of had my path in her hands. I'd seen leaders who've responded to a member like that say, "Oh, that's really unfortunate. Here's the EAP pamphlet. Good luck." Now, to my forever gratitude, this inspector did the opposite. She said, okay, you threw it all at me here, Bri, but we'll get through it together. We will, you're not alone. We'll get through it. Let's see how we can start getting through it. And when she said that, it was just such a relief, because I felt like I had an ally who was, inside the organization. And from there, everything started to go up a bit. There were still some rough patches. I took some time off. My psychiatrist put me through a very rigorous, treatment course of treatment, but it was what I needed. She was very blunt with me. She was very honest with me, and I needed that at that point. And slowly but surely, things started to get better, and I was able to go from way down here to, back to level, and then eventually up beyond that. But yeah, those were some very dark times. Twice during that time, during that period of, the end of 2011, I had contemplated taking my life because I just didn't see any way out of this blackness. I just didn't see any, the old saying, light at the end of the tunnel. I didn't see that. And I got as far as, basically being ready to make my way to my vehicle. And I had it planned out what I was going to do. And then both times I stopped and I just started thinking about the ramifications and what would happen. And I didn't go through with it. Both times I was very intoxicated, and I ended up, crying myself to sleep on the couch. And so when we have brothers and sisters who've gone down that very dark road, I get it. I understand, because there were times I couldn't see any other way out. So I absolutely see how you can get to that point. So that was the low point. That was, the crash. And before I go on to the more, positive aspect, or, the starting to come back up, the rebirth, the growth, a few things I really would like to make sure people take away from that, from the first part of my story. Most people wait. Most people, most first responders in general. So Louise mentioned that I'd written 2 books, and a part of those research, I talked to, oh God, probably a couple thousand almost now first responders across North America and across the world, really, plus lots of, fire chiefs, police chiefs, psychiatrists, psychologists. So I talked to lots of people in this world of ours who deal with operational stress injuries and post-traumatic stress. And the one common thread that kept coming out over and over was most people had an idea there was a problem, but they waited until they absolutely hit bottom. And that was me for sure. Like I said, every now and then I had a little glimmer that, there was something happening, and I should have trusted my gut, and I didn't. I said, looking back now, I can almost, pinpoint almost sometimes days when I should have said, okay, something is wrong, get it together. Same thing if you have, sort of those glimmers that someone you're close to, or someone you on your platoon, someone in your office, somebody in your department is not just your gut. And I'll talk a little bit about difficult conversations and leadership style in a moment. Another huge mistake I made, and this one is quite common as well, shutting out your family. Probably the worst thing I did. Like I said, right the very first morning after Mike's death, I had an opportunity to open up to my wife, who would have gotten it because, like I said, she came from a policing family. Her father was a ident staff sergeant, retired an ident staff sergeant. So, I didn't see sometimes the worst of the worst. So she would have absolutely, but I felt it wasn't her burden to bear. It was my cross to bear. It was looking back now, it was my ego. It was my youth. It was my inexperience. It was my arrogance that I had it all nailed down and I could take care of this myself. Looking back now, that was probably the biggest mistake I made, because again, like I said, when I began, when I told my story to my inspector, I could have had an ally in my family right there who would have started walking that path with me right from the start. A lot of people carry guilt or regret during, tied to incidents with PTSD. I did for a long time. For a long, long time, I blame myself for Mike's death. I felt like I should have been better equipped. I should have done more. I should have acted more quickly. And that was one of the things that really took me quite a while to get over. Like I said, I talked to a doctor who was able to help me understand Mike's injuries and able to explain to me, hey, there was nothing you could have done. It took me a long time to get to that point, but now I realize that as professionals in the policing world, as long as you do everything you can during the course of your day, whether it's out on the road, whether it's in a support role, whether it's sitting behind a dispatch console, whatever it may be, as long as you do everything, during the course of that day to the best of your knowledge and training and abilities, and, you do your best to get everybody home safe, that's all we can ask. We can't blame ourselves when things happen, because sometimes just shitty, unfortunate things happen in our world. It's that simple. And the blame and the guilt was one of the things I really had to work at getting over. And again, working with a good professional, working with my psychiatrist, that was one of the things we tackled. Even working with her, I almost had to, feel like I was kind of broken down again into parts, like like a big Lego tower that got knocked over. And then we rebuilt the tower, but it got rebuilt stronger, it got rebuilt better. And that was her job. And that was not only her job, but also the role of some very, very great leaders I had during my recovery. And this is what I want to focus now a little bit more on, sort of the building up part, because that's what I really want to leave people with. Not so much the the downfall, because we've heard about the downfall of too many of our brothers and sisters. The success stories, those are the ones that make us get up and put our uniform on, or get ready for shift at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. or 11 at night, whatever the shift may be that you're working. So in my opinion, the role that leadership plays in recovering from not just operational stress injury, but recovering from any mental health issue, and not only recovery, but managing day to day in our workplace, the role that leadership plays cannot be overstated. Now, like I said, I've talked to thousands of different first responders, and another common thread, unfortunately more common than I had ever wanted to hear, was how many the recovery or how many first responder, and again, I'm being broad, I'm talking about civilians, I'm talking about uniforms, everything. How many people had their recovery or had their journey back derailed by a so-called leader who didn't care, or didn't get it, or didn't understand, or just didn't feel it was their responsibility. And actually, it's funny. Just before I got on the phone this morning, or on the computer, sorry, for this call, I was reading. I'm subscribed to a couple different leadership, daily news releases, and one came out. And it was produced by Verizon Media. So Verizon phone company, Verizon Cell in the States. They also have a big, media arm that has magazines and podcasts and all kinds of things. And they published an article today, and it said that based on a survey they did in March and April, 93% of, and this was across the world, 93% of managers feel that over the last year, mental health in their workplace and the mental health issues among their workforce has absolutely impacted their productivity, their bottom line, their morale, everything. And that's not just trauma caused in the workplace, or issues caused in the workplace. That's COVID stress, that's financial stress, it's family stress, it's everything. I mean, 93% of them said, yeah, absolutely, mental health is impacting. And that's in the business world. That's in the sort of corporate world. What is it like in our world, I wonder, where we as an organization are constantly dealing with high stress incidents, media scrutiny, not knowing a lot of times what we're going into, not knowing what we're dealing with, and not going in blind, but going in, sometimes literally in the dark. So I would love to know what percentage that is. And I did a quick search to see if there were any stats along those same lines for first responders, and there's nothing really out yet. But I thought that was quite startling that 93% of the people they interviewed absolutely felt that mental health was being a huge detriment to their office. Some of those, like I said, I had some leaders during my recovery who were just fantastic. 2 or 3 of them who were so strong and just did so much for me. And they were the ones who had difficult conversations with me. And I know, especially, on the sergeant's course, on the supervisor course, you hear You can't be afraid to have difficult conversations. You have to have those difficult conversations. You know, you have to address performance issues. You have to address these things. You can't just let them go. The thing is, it's absolutely true. Because those, you know, 3 or 4 people that I talked about, 2 or 3 people, had them with me and sat me down and were honest with me and said, listen, here's some things we've seen, or, you know, here's something I've seen. Do you need some help tackling it? Or do you need some time off? Or do you feel like you need even half a day off to just go and manage this? It would have been just very easy for them to say, okay, you know what, I don't have time for this, and I just need to get through my 8 hours. You know, Brian seems fine. He's at his desk. He's on the road, and things are good. But they didn't. They stopped and they took the time to have those conversations, and it meant the world to me. And in turn, that led to me realizing I had to have the same kind of conversations, and that was a very big shift in my leadership style. And I've sat down now across my desk, or across, you know, going car to car with people, and have, you know, shed more tears on both sides than I ever thought I would have. And sometimes they've started very negatively. Sometimes they were not well received. But the message always got across. And sometimes they've led to absolutely unbelievable, you know, moments and conversations that I never would have had otherwise if I hadn't done that. And you know, we have to do that as police professionals. We can, you know, talk to a complainant, or we can talk to someone on the phone, or we can talk to, you know, a public complaint, say, no problem. And we can, you know, take their complaint, take their considerations, and deal with it. Yet we still have this fear sometimes of doing that with our brothers and sisters, and we should be able to. Those are the people we should be most easily able to have these conversations with. So yeah, it absolutely changed my approach to leadership. Something else I did, and this was a huge step. This was when I was in Caledon. When the Ombudsman's report came out in 2012, about how the OPP had dealt with operational stress injuries, and there was a lot of work to do. I remember getting a message from the Central Region Chief Superintendent at the time, and he said, you know, the report came out. We need to talk about this. It doesn't show us in a very good light. You know, let's, you know, please send the link out to your people. Let's get rolling on this. So I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to do one better. I'm going to do some living out loud here. So I included the link, and I said, you know, the report came out, and I did sort of a little intro. And then for the first time, I told my story to a work group, and I typed out my whole story, you know, talk of suicide, talk about, you know, the issues that caused my marriage, everything. And I remember just before I hit send, I went, oh my God, you know, do I want to do this? Because once it's out there, it's out there. And then I thought, nope, this is a time when you need to, you know, walk that talk. And I hit send, and then I went, oh my God, what did I just do? It took about 3 minutes to get a response saying, you know, staff, thank you for talking about this. Could I come see you tomorrow? Absolutely. And then it just snowballed. And I was getting replies from our detachment. And then by that evening, I was getting replies from other detachments. And over the next few days from, you know, other police services, other fire services, and people just saying, you know, thank you for talking about this. You know, I've had my own experiences, but, you know, I've never been able to talk about it. And as terrifying as that was one of those things I talked about that led to, you know, incredible, amazing moments and conversations, because that showed me that people do want to talk about this. People in policing do want to discuss this. And it also showed me that people in leadership roles need to take that on. We need to be the ones leading the charge. Dealing with my own mental health issues also changed how I do policing. It's changed how I view, you know, people we deal with who have addictions or mental health issues, or you know, homelessness. Everybody has a story. You know, I remember thinking at one point, if I had made a few different moves that time that Kathy said to me, sorry, Kathy's my wife, saying, you know, get help or get out, it would have made things, I could have very well been one of those people. So it really changed both my leadership style and my policing style in general. Now, I mean, don't get me wrong. It PTS or any operational stress injury is not a smooth path. It's always, for me, since that crash, it's always been up. But there's still, little down moments, right? Like on a roller coaster, you get one really big hill at the beginning, then one big down, and then little bumps all the way through. I still have moments of frustration when I find I can't focus, or I lose time, or I can't remember a simple word because the chronic PTS has impacted my memory, my ability to keep track of things. You should see my desk. I have sticky notes everywhere. I have timers going off all the time because that's just one of the things that PTS does. It affects your cognition that way. The great thing is now, instead of feeling lost about it like I did at first, talking to professionals, talking to other first responders and other policing professionals who've been through the same thing, you end up with a huge toolkit of ways to cope. And for me, one of my tools in that toolkit is talking about it, is addressing groups like Encompas this morning, or like the presentation Encompas put together, addressing conferences, speaking to other first responder agencies, doing online training, writing my books. That's one of my tools, is to live out loud about it. And again, doing so has led to some incredible opportunities and incredible meetings of people that I never would have met otherwise. Now, there is a concept called post-traumatic growth, and the gist of that is that if you are willing to fight through your trauma, your compassion fatigue, your burnout, because those are all operational stress injuries, just like post-traumatic stress. If you come through it and you haven't, drank yourself to death or killed yourself, or, otherwise rendered yourself, unable to do the job you love anymore, it changes you for the better. It changes how you, like I said, how you view policing. It changes your approach to family, to relationships. It changes your perspective of yourself. It's a great concept because it basically says that, yeah, post-traumatic stress is awful. And going through what I did, the depths of what I did, even sometimes my recovery, I remember thinking sometimes this is not worth it. This is far more introspection and far more tearing myself up and down than I ever wanted to do. Because for a long time, post-traumatic stress was a shield for me. Work was my shield and my mask, and it put this barrier between myself and my family and my relationships. But it also let me hide behind it. And the amazing thing is, folks, once it's confronted, it doesn't have to be the end of anything. Opening up and talking about your issues, talking about your PTS, talking about your whatever it is that is troubling you, or whatever it is and it doesn't have to be, remember, it's relative, right? If you find something traumatic, if you find something stressful, if you find something haunting that you've experienced at work, it doesn't matter what other people think. Stress is relative, trauma is relative. It's what you have seen, experienced, read, heard, smelt, felt. So it's a very personal thing, but it can be overcome. It really can be, but you have to be willing to let people in. You have to be willing to let your family in, which I didn't do for so long. And it took me quite a while to rebuild those relationships with my kids and my wife and my extended family. It can make you a better police professional. It can make you a better parent. It can make you a better spouse, partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, but you have to let it happen. And you have to come to the realization that I can't do this on my own. And once two things did it for me: that realization, I can't do this by myself anymore. And the other realization, the other side of the coin is, okay, I'm not alone. Once I realized there were other people out there dealing with the same issues, and starting to meet other first responders and other professionals in that field who are dealing with the same thing, those words are powerful. Or if you're the one talking to someone, a brother or sister comes to you and says, something's wrong, something's been bothering me, hearing those 3 words, or 4 words, "You are not alone," is so powerful, because all of a sudden your burden is now being shared with someone else who has your best interests at heart. And we really do. I think we really do owe it to our brothers and sisters who've gone before us, who've made sacrifices, who have suffered quite often in silence because of things they've seen and heard and done in the name of their role in policing. We owe it to those brothers and sisters who, at this point, can't um, maybe can't speak for themselves anymore, or we have their legacy. We owe it to them to be bright points of light for people to find in the darkness. If we can do that, if we can be a bright point of light to help another brother or sister during what might be some of their darkest days, then we really have achieved our purpose in joining the world of policing. We join to help people. Well, there can be no greater help than that of your brothers and sisters, the people around you, the people you love, and the people that you go to bat for every day to protect the people and the citizens of Ontario. If we can do that for them, we can certainly be that for each other.